Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in just a moment here. Just going to give people a chance to get in and get their audio settled. That's a pretty good critical mass. So welcome to today's webinar. Before we start, I want to cover a few technical details about this in case you haven't joined an ACRO webinar before. We use Zoom webinar. It is extremely similar to Zoom meeting with two major exceptions. The first is that your cameras and microphones are disabled by default. So you don't have to worry about interrupting us or being seen or anything like that. But it does mean for interaction, your options are a little more limited. So for this session in particular, since there's some more collaborative elements in there, we're going to highly encourage you to use the hand raise function. If you press that little hand on your dashboard there, your hand will be raised in the attendee window, and I could go in and unmute you. And at that point, you can speak if you'd like to. So during the discussion periods, we'd highly recommend doing that. But there's also a chat and Q&A feature. For chat, you can use that for at any time, obviously. Just make sure that if you want anybody else, especially other attendees, to see your message, that you select all panelists and attendees from there. And then you can use the Q&A if you have a specific question that you'd like to address to the group and the panel specifically. So without further ado, I want to hand it off to Becky Folks.
Thanks, Mike. Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be on the line with all of you here today. Thanks for joining us. My name is Becky Fowkes with ACRO, and we'd like to welcome you to part 3 of the Small College Registrar Summer Series. This series was generated through the Small College Registrar list from your suggestions and input. Today, our panelists will be looking through a future lens at the role of the registrar at a small college. Before we begin, like Mike said, I just want to go through a few little housekeeping details. As always, we are hopeful that our technology will not fail us. Like many of you, ACRO is in a hybrid mode, and some of us are still remote, our panelists are remote, our presenters are remote, and so we're working at the mercy of some home Wi-Fi. So hopefully everything goes great as planned, and if not, we ask for your patience. Just reiterating what Mike said, if you have a question, please, our first preference is that you use the raise your hand feature, or you can go ahead and type it into the Q&A section of down there at the bottom of your screen. And like Mike said, please feel free to use the chat throughout. And now I want to go ahead and turn the time over to today's presenters. We have Catherine Scoville, who is the registrar with Russell Sage College, and also Erin Collins, who is the registrar at Pomona College. So ladies, the time is now yours.
Hi, everyone. I am so excited to be here. I have a lot of energy, but I am so excited to be here with you all today and with my co-host, Catherine. As Becky said, my name is Erin Michelle Collins, and I'm currently the registrar at Pomona College. I am 4 weeks in. Prior to that, I was the registrar at California Institute of the Arts, but I'm just super excited to have this open discussion. I want to say first, this is our safe space. So we're creating a safe space for everyone here to just listen and to react and to be involved as much as you'd like to. I'll stop talking now and let Catherine say something.
Well, hello, I'm Catherine Scoville, and I'm the registrar at Russell Sage College in upstate New York. I have been here for a long time. I started my career here, moved up the ranks. I have been registrar for about 4 years now. And I am excited to share this with you, as I know that as registrars, we're trying to think ahead. We're always trying to think ahead. And this time, that this last year and a half has been hard. And so I hope that we can share some ideas with you and get your input and questions, and just figure out how we're going to move ahead and what the future looks like for us.
So we have a few topics. It's not a very long presentation, Catherine and I met and we started talking about our topic that we could have with you all. And so from our banter and speaking to each other, these are the three things that we wanted to talk about. And so our first topic is living in the now, and how have we been living in the now for these last oh gosh, year and a half. And it's hard to even like think. I don't know how many of you all are, as you're thinking through things that have happened, everything is either pre-COVID or post-COVID. I don't really remember. I know that things happened prior to COVID, but trying to pinpoint that date is like I don't remember. I just know it was pre or it was after. So we've been living in this state, and as Catherine was saying, like I'm a total planner. It's been so hard for me to not be able to plan. I like to tell people that I think in 360 degrees. I'm the kind of person that if somebody says the sky is blue, great. Why is the sky blue? It's because the ocean reflects and, all of that. I want to know the why. So there's been a lot that has happened over this last year and a half where I didn't know the why. I'm giving the answer, or I'm given a thing that I need to try to fix or work around. And that's my granddaughter in the background. Sorry. But having to like fix or work around. And it's just right now. And I can't think about what we're going to be doing a year from today.
Right.
So I'll let Catherine kind of, yeah.
Well, I'm a planner as well. I like to know where we're at and where we're going and what are the steps we need to take to get there. And this year and a half has taught me patience, that I can't plan everything. I can't see everything. I can't answer all the questions. I know that we've all gotten so many questions like, well, what are we doing about this? Well, what are we doing about that? And we're like, okay, well, we're waiting. We're waiting to see what the guidance is, whether it's from the CDC, whether it's from our institutions, and having to, and I hate this word. This word has become a horrible word for 2020 and 2021, pivot, right? And we've been having to pivot, okay, well, we're thinking this, oh, nope, we're now pivoting to this. So that makes it hard for us to plan. And as leaders, we're supposed to plan. We're supposed to know what's happening. We're supposed to have this lovely vision of where we're going to go and what we're doing. And so definitely it has been a lesson in patience, I think, and challenging for how we had to change things and do things. I'll kind of get onto that topic of how we built our teams. And how we're maintaining our teams. I don't know about anybody else, but I've had to do some hiring in this time. I've actually had to hire two people, and I do have to say that I am really enjoying doing interviews via Zoom. They're just easier to schedule, and I come from a small college, but we have two campuses. So if I have to have people on opposite campuses be on a interview committee with me, Zoom definitely helps. To try to coordinate that so nobody's really traveling between campuses. But it's been difficult, and trying to figure out and get people in and build those teams and the people that you want on your teams. How's everybody been doing with that?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any hands raised right now, but I can say over the last year and a half, I also have had to hire. And I actually did like Zoom. It was more complicated, especially when you're trying to do, working in higher ed, doing like the panel interviews. That was interesting, trying to coordinate everyone's schedules. But some things that I did this year to try to build and maintain my team remotely was ensuring that we had contact every day. And that's just, you have to kind of see, the environment and the culture in which you're in and see if that works. But at my previous institution, and hopefully at this one that I am at now, we meet every day for like 30 minutes just to check in. And honestly, just to, how are you doing? What did you eat for dinner last night? What movie did you watch? But then also, because we've been all working in this remote space, this is a time for like a data dump. Okay, this is the meeting that I was in yesterday. Here's what I learned. And did you hear about the new student orientation and what's happening and how we're involved? Okay, great. Who needs to know who needs to be tagged in? And again, making sure to maintain one-on-one meetings as well. So we have our group meetings, but everybody's personality is a little bit different, and not everybody wants to engage in group settings. Maybe they don't feel like they can, or maybe they're a little more shy, so they don't really speak up. So making sure that you've created that safe space. I know I talked about that earlier, but you've created that safe space for yourself and your team, where they know that they can kind of talk to you about some of the issues that they might be going through. I'm sure a lot of people might have been affected personally by everything that has been happening around COVID and social justice and all of that. So we're making sure that you're maintaining and building up your team and creating the safe space for them to communicate with you and for you, and so that you can make sure that you have put everything in place to support them.
I wholeheartedly agree, Erin. I think that having that those sessions, whether they're team meetings or whether they're one-on-ones with folks, to share ideas, to vent, to just kind of see where they are as people. I think that's key in our leadership, especially those of us who don't have huge teams, but definitely making sure that we know where they're coming from so that we can address their concerns. We do have some questions and some answers, and definitely people saying that planning means that we have to develop a lot of different scenarios to figure out what those next steps are. So yes, totally agree with that. Sometimes it's hard when we don't know necessarily what the multiple scenarios might look like, but definitely it has been a good practice, I think, for all of us. A message from Hope says she's just curious on how many people are still remote compared to on campus. I know that for my institution, for example, we've had a presence on campus since last July and had a rotating schedule since that point. But with the majority of the team being having that remote work, other than a couple of people who needed to be on campus at all times in order to work. Now we've moved to almost everybody kind of being back, with only having a day or a week being remote, and what that might look like. But I know that there is some flexibility with the teams. What's everyone else looking like?
So for me, my prior institution, we were not going into the office really at all. Only to print. We were able to pivot, pivot, and have all of our forms were digital, use FormStack. We went into the office to print as we needed, or to get the mail. And just before I left, there was a push for everyone to start going back into campus and for there to be a presence. Here at my current institution, we're still remote, and we will start to come back into campus, but I do have some flexibility with that, where we can rotate our schedule. So I'm sure it's probably all over for everyone, somewhere in between. And so we're still trying to figure out what that's going to look like as we move forward.
And I actually made a poll on the fly if we want to get a good idea for everyone that's here today. I mean, we can still talk while it's
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd
Sure.
be great. Thank you.
This is a kind of because I feel like some people are in this, you might be hybrid, but you're mostly at home, or hybrid, but you're mostly in the office. So get a better and more specific idea of what the kind of situation is.
Oh, and Melinda put our colleges all online, so we're all still remote. Yeah, so everyone's situation is different. Everyone's current living experience, working experience is different.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm sure all of our students are all over the place on what they want and need,
right,
as well.
Right. So ready to move on to the next kind of discussion? Oh, wow. So fully in office, 57%. Wow. Okay. Okay. And fully remote, 6%. So we're kind of, yeah, everything in between,
Mhm.
everything in between.
Yes, that is. And I don't know if if I find that surprising or not, but I feel like definitely we were kind of all over the place, especially I know as we have been discussing it on our listservs and things, but definitely seeing the numbers, I think it helps to really visualize that.
For sure. And there
All
were a
right, looks
few, I don't know if you noticed the questions in the Q&A there, um, related to this, unless we want to move on
sure.
now.
Oh yeah,
We
I
we can
I
address those.
agree. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The first I
So
found, I'm sorry,
that's okay.
you can go ahead.
It looks like somebody says, I found that productivity increased on my end with remote work. Have others witnessed the same? I definitely know that I was definitely a lot more productive, although I think I also worked a lot more hours than I would if I was in the office when I was remote. Um,
Yeah, I feel like I was very, very productive, highly productive, but that's the thing. Just speaking for myself, I think my boundaries got blurred considerably. So when we first started in the remote space, I was doing like I read a lot on LinkedIn of like how to work remote and okay, you should get dressed and in your full gear, your work gear, and maybe you should build in a commute. So go for a walk and then start working or have your commute at the end of the day. So the first few months I was doing that. And then something happened in the summer with the schedules and are we going to be hybrid or high flex or what are we doing? And we rebuilt the schedule 3 times. And my whole work life balance just it really wasn't. And I will be completely honest, I worked too much and I was responding to emails in the evening and then in on the weekends as well. So I was just constantly on. And I also have 4 children. So I was just constantly on. And as I tell my kids, I was not filling up my cup. I was pouring my cup, pouring myself into others, but I was not setting aside enough time to fill my cup. So I changed all of that, like kind of like October, November. I tried to find some semblance of a rebalance. And it's a
mhm.
constant, I'm constantly balancing. So yeah. So that gotta people for those who are in the space and feel the same and work the same as we all do, being mindful of the balancing so you're not doing too much.
I agree. Balance is key. And I think that we probably all have had a little bit of chaos and not had great balance in this last year. Um, and getting that back, I think, is key and still being productive. Um, and it looks like another question is, are people getting pushback from people who want to just remain remote? Um,
I don't
I
know
know
if
we
I,
have a remote work policy that has to be approved by the supervisor and the associated vice president of that area to be remote or to have a flexible work schedule in terms of partial, some hybrid schedule. And so I think that at least for us, we've been trying to be flexible with folks and what their needs are and what we can provide with still being able to service our students.
and I think it really just depends. So, and I'm in 2 different places. I'm remembering where I was, and now I'm at a new place. But I know at my previous institution, I did have to. You kind of have to be mindful and ask and again create a safe space with your team so that they're comfortable to tell you how they feel about coming back and what are the options for them can they have a staggered schedule? Do they have to, depending on the workspace, if they have their own office or if they're, in like kind of like the bullpen area. So I think it's really important you got to have those one-on-one conversations and just kind of see and try to meet people where they are. And if possible, try to allow them a longer runway for them to kind of build back in and get the practice of coming in, so that they do start to feel more comfortable being in shared spaces.
It's definitely been a transition, a slow transition, with some people kind of jumping in and some people kind of holding back for us as well. It sounds, based on the discussion in our chat, it's that, there's a lot of anxiety over coming back to work, that people have decided not to return to work because of that. So I really think that we're probably, going to see different things come up, or whether your institution is requiring vaccines or not, and how that affects, who's staying and who's not. We've had people, not in my office, but at the college in general, who don't want to get a vaccine and have chosen to leave work and not work for us anymore. So I think that we're probably going to see a lot more of that as people have really thought about, what they want, what they like, and what they want, they're okay to live with, based on the pandemic and how they want to live their lives. Should we go to the next slide, Erin?
Yeah.
Or the next part of the slide?
Yeah, the next part of the slide. It was easy making this one slide. Just put it all on one. Sorry, anyway. So the next thing that Catherine and I kind of, and I'll have to say, wonderful co-host and good like banter, trying to figure out like what we can talk about. But how has the vision and mission of the office changed? As I mentioned before, or we already talked about, we're all planners. I was the registrar at CalArts for 3 years, and we went through a visioning mission thing and writing a new vision, and then COVID, right? And how all of the things that we thought we would accomplish, did we do that? And what changed? And one example that I have is implementing a new student information system in the middle of a pandemic. We were on our way to implement. So I don't know how many of you all are on Colleague, but WebAdvisor was going away at the end of this year, and so implementing self-service for faculty and students last summer, and so having to do all of this remotely and Zooming and actually accelerating the timeline. So with that, I can say accomplished a lot. I'm sure you all can find something where you're like, I did that. I accomplished that. I had to do that sooner. How many of you all had to pivot? Again, I'm trying to stop using that word now. Pivot to, creating like online forms and online processes. So we probably accomplished like so much, but there are probably some things that you just couldn't get to. You just couldn't get to. So I'll stop there. I don't know, Catherine, if you have, yeah.
I think definitely it's, I feel like sometimes we're, this COVID has made us kind of get stuck in the weeds, where we're not necessarily looking forward. We're just trying to get through now. But I hear you, Erin, about implementing self-service. Luckily we did that about 3 years ago, but we still haven't moved everything over from WebAdvisor. So that's a slower transition. But the main student planning thing we did a few years ago, so I understand that, and I know for us, for instance, we are implementing schedule building software. We're using CourseLeaf, and instead of our homegrown system, which used WebAdvisor technology. So that's been interesting, because one of the main people on our team is fully remote. So that we've been doing everything that way as well. I know in terms of like our mission, our vision, you know, things have just, some things have slowed down and some things have sped up. It's a lot of oh gosh, I'm having a hard time with this word. How we prioritize and, you know, what we have to prioritize, and how that changes. And sometimes that's changed weekly, daily, monthly, whatever it is, due to new information, due to whatever new vision the institution as a whole is coming up with. So it's definitely, it's definitely changed. You know, again, some good things. We've put a lot of things online, a lot of forms online because of COVID, and we're keeping those things. You know, most of the time, even before COVID, people didn't want to come into the office unless they absolutely had to. They wanted to be able to do everything on their phones, submit forms, get their questions answered. So, you know, some of that, it pushed us to kind of move ahead with those kinds of goals a lot sooner and a lot quicker and a little more all-encompassing. But definitely, so I'm curious, I don't know if anybody wants to put this in the chat or not, but how has your vision changed? What goals did you have? Do you still have those goals, or have they been put on hold and you have new goals?
And I was going to mention, so I'm at a new institution. I started, this is week number 4, and I am starting at I interviewed remote. I had a whole lot of Zoom meetings. I've started remote and meeting a new team remotely, although some of them I have met in person. So what I'm kind of thinking about is creating, and like, I'm meeting a new team. I'm developing relationships with a new team. They're getting to know me. How do I figure out what was the mission before with the team? What is their mission moving forward? And how do we do this again remotely? Because we will be kind of on different schedules, you know, at least for this first semester. And how do we all, you know, make sure that we move in the same direction? So I'm actually asking, I'm asking for anyone who's in the same spot as me in the chat, if you have any nuggets of wisdom that you want to divulge. I appreciate that, because I'm sure that of these, there's 82 people total. There might be some who are in the same exact spot as I am. Oh.
Well, my only advice, Erin, is to listen, and just listen and digest what you're hearing and see what their vision is or what their ideas are, how that inspires your vision. It looks like, as people are responding, that similar situations where people wanted to go electronic and have certain things online, and it just pushed everything to the forefront. So I think we're on board with that. As I said, I know that was one of the things for us as well, is that we were, you know, paper dependent. We had a lot of forms, and, you know, where people used to just, you know, scan their forms and email them, and now it's more that we're trying to use technology to get around all of that. So it forced us to do that.
And I think probably the mission, you know, we work in higher education. And I was at, I think it was a PACRO conference, and I can't remember the gentleman who was speaking, but he mentioned that we're all in the business of human development. That is what we do. We are aiding our students in developing and becoming, you know, full-fledged human beings who can make sound decisions for themselves. And so I think that part hasn't changed, right? Like, that's what we do. We work in higher ed because we love what we do. We love interacting with students and faculty. And some of us, like maybe like myself, I like that we get to do IT work, but we're not in IT. We get to program the system and learn how to write rules and all of that. But the bottom line is the service that we provide service for the institution, and that we provide service for the students, for the faculty. We provide guidance when there needs to be guidance on implementing policy and procedure. So that mission, that's what we do, but I think we've had to do this in a different context. And we probably have had to set aside what we thought we knew or what we learned from our predecessors and try to figure out how to do this for ourselves, for our students, for our staff in a new way. So, and so I just was thinking that now, like, yeah, the mission is the same, but we are just doing this like so differently, and have had to adapt. See, I'm not going to say pivot anymore. We have had to adapt, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, we've strengthened our adaptation skills.
And I think we advocate, we have as people in registrar land, we see students, we see policy, and we can advocate how to change policy, how to amend it, how to tweak it, how to make an exception. And maybe it's a short-term exception. I know many of us probably advocated to extend the withdrawal deadline from courses, or extend pass-fail policies last spring. And I think that as we move to the future, there's going to be other opportunities for that, where we really critically look at how we serve and what our policies are, and how we can make things seamless for our students, but also have that level of integrity that is needed. And I know all of us are very, know about how to make things intentional and to have integrity with how we deal with faculty, students, the administration, and how we, what are some of the sorts of things that we will have to adjust in the future, or, currently adjust for the future, or whatever it is. So I know that I think we just need to continue to look out at those things and advocate when needed. And we use our listserv to bounce ideas and figure out what everybody else is doing. And I think that's always key. I know I've sent out a message just the other day to this listserv of, what does everybody do about X?
Yeah, so I think that's actually a good segue, if we're ready, to our next topic of how do we visualize the future? How are we doing that? It's difficult to, again, you want to plan, you have this need to plan, and in our role, that's really what our job is. But how do we do that when we don't know what is going to happen? Honestly, in the next few weeks, things could change, or at the end of this semester or the end of next semester, things can change. So one of the things that we have on here is our office structure, which we talked about before, where we're living now in this moment, but thinking about the future. What did we have to adapt to? How did we have to change and adapt our work schedule and our team that we might want to keep or that we might want to stop? But are we at this point now where you can't really go back? And is there going to be, I think, there was a question in the chat about the push to go back, or is there an opportunity to create a new future in the way that we choose to live and work? Hope I'm making sense. I don't know, Catherine, if you have, what I'm saying. I'll let you go ahead.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that, now we're hearing about the Delta variant of COVID-19 and how that's spreading, and how, there's factors to think about. And does that change our plans for the fall? And which means does it change our plans after fall? But definitely thinking about office structure and how successful were we? I think most of us were probably very, very successful being remote, and adapting and adjusting how we do things. Were some things harder? Sure. I don't know about you, but I don't have a printer at home, so I couldn't print anything. But I know that there is ways to get around it, and I think that having all those pieces, remembering all those pieces, if you do need to advocate for your office on, maybe having a little bit of flexibility, for things, whether you have a team member currently that has to continue to be fully remote, and maybe you have team members who are going to be on campus all the time, and maybe you have team members who want that flexibility to have a day or two remotely every week. So really to think about, how successful were we, but also looking at, ways that, we weren't as successful, and seeing if those can be addressed as well as we make our determinations, as we advocate for whatever change we want to have or need to have or try to have for our teams and our institutions. I know some institutions are, big push. It's a normal fall semester, and some of our institutions, like I said, I have 2 campuses that I have to staff, and making sure that there's somebody there at all times, and but being cognizant of trying to adjust for people's needs, and flexibility. One of the things I think it's just remembering how to lead our teams and keeping up morale, and a lot of things with COVID, I think we've gotten better at keeping in touch, using technology to keep in touch instead of having for instance for us, instead of having a staff meeting once a month where we all try to get together in the same room, which sometimes was hard to schedule. Now it's not so hard. Nobody has to travel. But also, how we're going to visualize, again, how we're going to change things or serve our students or serve others in the institution. Looking back and how we've done it, and how successful we were, or again, not successful, and implementing those changes as well, and thinking about that critically. I don't think any one of us has been perfect, but I think we've done a very, very good job.
Yeah, and Holly put in the chat, the biggest challenge for small offices is really like the staffing, like how when you have a small team, yeah, how do you do this? How do you do this if you do have some of your staff that need to or want to be hybrid or work remotely, and how do you work within the regulations of your institution, and either the push to, like, we're returning to a normal semester, and I don't claim to have the answer, but I love that we have this forum to kind of talk through what everyone is doing, and the different listservs, and how do we do this, because there are many other businesses, organizations that are they have these decisions that they are going to be hybrid, or they are going to be remaining remote. And so how do we how do we who work in higher education, how do we also adapt? So this is another thing to learn and to think about as we move forward. Another note that I did add to this slide is about, there's other things that have happened this year outside of COVID. And that's, the social justice issues that have been, that have occurred all over the country. And, the talks and discussions around DEI. And I also add, belonging as well, because you can be given a seat at the table, but if you don't feel like you belong, then you won't feel as comfortable talking and advocating for yourself. So that is just another piece to kind of bring into this whole discussion. Is a lot of things have changed over this last year, and how do you incorporate all of those things that you've learned from COVID, from social justice and equity and inclusion and belonging into how you shape what the future of your office and your vision and your mission is moving forward. So again, not having all of the answers or really any, but just putting that out there as something also to consider and to think about as leaders and on our teams and at our institution. And just like you said, advocating, listening. That's a lot of things that have been happening in the chat, is listening to your team, listening to yourself, that voice in the back of your head that sometimes you ignore, listening to yourself and knowing, I think one thing that I learned a lot was I learned a lot more about myself this last year and what I could do. And like, I did a lot. There's a lot that I accomplished. And giving yourself your flowers of like, yeah, you did that, and your team, and acknowledging we did this. And I think looking at when you're thinking about the vision that you have and thinking about the future and how you want your office, to be structured and all of that, learning from the past, but also being mindful not to be afraid to fail. Because if you fail, then if you're being too afraid to fail, then you're not trying. You're not really trying. So I don't know if there was any other questions in the chat.
Well, I do see a question in question and answer. It's how are offices handling requests from staff that want to remain remote, whose roles don't involve much face-to-face interaction with students and faculty? I think in looking at the chat, I feel like people there are now policies and processes in place to try to address that and allow that at various institutions. I know that at ours, there is a discussion to be had with whoever the supervisor is and that vice president who oversees that area, to see if that's something that that will be allowed, and then as long as we are adjusting, for instance, we have to adjust job descriptions and include in that job description that the position can be remote and what hours that position will be having while they're remote. I know that, some people need to have flexibility. They can't work the normal business hours, although they might have to be available sometimes during normal business hours for meetings, for doing Zoom sessions with students, for instance. And then some people will be available during normal business hours. They just happen to be remote. I guess the question would be to your institution and whether they have a remote work policy, which I know for us, it's a new policy. We did not have one. And when I asked about it a couple of months ago, they weren't sure of what it was going to look like. I don't know how other places are addressing that, but I believe that we addressed, that people were answering that question throughout the chat or earlier. Also, we have I think I was saying, as a small team, we have grown closer, but we had to support each other. But being a small, and then somebody else said, being a small team in the pandemic has had a really unsettling effect on the team, and we have not been able to rebuild. I think, again, the advice that we can give is that we need to listen to each other and try to have understanding of where we're at, and see if people know what they need. And sometimes they don't, and it's figuring it out as we go along to get that sense of team again. But, I think that the ramifications from this last year and a half are going to be going on for a while as people adjust. And especially if folks have had COVID affect them personally and their family and their friends. And that period is different for everybody in terms of how they cope and how they deal with bad news or deal with illness or unfortunately death, and how that might affect people. I think we just have to have an open mind and allow people some flexibility.
And I can say I'm currently, again, like I said, at a new institution. So I'm learning the new culture in which I am working and navigating, team members that are remote and how to allow them to remain remote if possible. So that's something that you just have to kind of dig in, speaking to my boss, speaking to HR, talking to the team. Cause again, that equity issue, is it equitable? And so I think if it is something that can be done and your whole team, especially if it affects the morale, like you have like a good solid team and you want to keep that team intact, then try to do whatever you can do to keep that good team, moving forward, and make accommodations where you can, if permitting, again, talking to your boss or talking to HR. If something can be allowed, if the person doesn't really interact with students as much, how can they be available via Zoom? Having Zoom open office hours for faculty and staff, how can they still be supporting the rest of the team in that way because they are remote? So kind of thinking outside of the box.
And that might mean reviewing job duties. It might mean reviewing some cross-training possibilities. I know that we try to have, cross-training so that every person in our office knows a piece of each other's jobs, so that, God forbid, something happens to that person or they leave. We're not, one person isn't trying to do another full-time job. So I would suggest doing something similar for that, especially if you are allowing some flexibility, but you still need certain coverage of responsibility of people pitching in. How can you adjust that cross training and look at who does what and who can do what if they are remote. I think, and I know we've all heard about lots of cross training over the years. But I do think that is a meaningful thing that can be very helpful to teams. Again, whether your people are flexible and remote, or whether they're all in the office, kind of having that so no one person is ever overwhelmed, I think is always my goal.
Oh, this is a really good question that's in the Q&A. Do you think administration should reimagine the role of the registrar, particularly at small institutions based on this new climate? If so, do we initiate that conversation? Wow, that is such a good question. Wow, I'll let you go, Catherine.
Knowing my institution and the push for getting everybody back, I definitely think it's a good time to reimagine our roles. I think that a lot of places are very data driven, and so having data to back up whatever your proposal is going to be key. And maybe that's using those pieces that what is no longer, like, for this and this, it's no longer needed for students to come into the office, and it can be done remotely. We were successful doing this and this. We got around this particular issue by doing this. Perhaps it's surveying your students in terms of what their preferences are. I mean, we all strive to be student-centered, with our, and how we approach students and serve students. So having that information from students would be key, I think, as well, is to try, when you're trying to change somebody's mind on what the role should look like. I know, survey results, you're lucky if you get 30% of students to respond. But I think any feedback that you can get will help your cause, in terms of if you're advocating for this reimagining. Erin, do you have anything else?
Yeah, this is such a good question. Marissa, Darby, good question. So I'm like reading, like, this is a great question. So I will say, I have a couple of things, and I'm like an open book, so hopefully I'm not like oversharing, but maybe I am. I just think that depending on the institution that you're at, your role could be very different.
Mm-hmm.
It depends as far as, the structure of the institution, the hierarchy of the institution, your reporting line. Maybe you report, there are some who report through enrollment management. There are some who report through like student services. Then there's some who report directly to the provost or equivalent. I think this last year, I think at some points there could have been, and I don't know if you all, depending on where you sit again in that hierarchy, were you in the appropriate space when a decision was made? Did you get to influence or did you get to advocate for yourself and your team based on whatever was trickling down? Did you get the opportunity to talk through that process before a final decision was made, to offer your recommendation as to, yes, option 1 could work, but actually option 3 is better. So in that sense, the reimagining of the role, that's something to think of. And where are you placed, and are you in the space when some conversations are had? So that is one thing. That's like, I'm thinking like globally of like the reimagining. And then, yeah, exactly what you were saying, Catherine, like reimagining and looking at the things that you were able to accomplish with your data, of like, this is all the things that we were able to do. These are all the things that we were able to accomplish. So anyone who is kind of thinking about their role, looking back at that and looking back at what you were able to do and how you were able to do it, and how does, the evidence that you have can kind of show this is the direction in which we should be going now. But this is just an excellent question.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And I don't know if there's anything else in the chat about that. I think we do have, I don't know, we can. Mm-hmm.
Hey, Mike, can we do a quick poll about the size of people's offices?
Yeah, sure. Just because I'm not super familiar, I don't know what good breakdowns would be, like 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 20, something like that. Since we're talking small colleges, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. I would say maybe like
1 to 3, 3 to 6,
yeah.
6 to 9.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then anything above that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so 10 plus basically being another one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and that will be, I think.
All right.
It would also be interesting to compare those numbers with the number of enrolled students.
That seems to always be a question on the listserv, is how big is your staff and what is your enrollment? As people try to advocate for either additional staff or figuring out if they can change the roles of people in the office and kind of shift those duties elsewhere. I know recently I was contacted by a college in the South, I don't remember where, who's asking questions about, what our roles were and, how many staff we had and what's our enrollment and, and they were an institution that weren't forward facing in the registrar's office. They were back facing. They did a lot of the background stuff.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
our
so
poll is up.
and in the chat, no, not including student assistants, and maybe not even including backfill positions. Like, what are your like core team number? Does that make
And
sense?
this includes I would imagine that this would include yourself.
Yeah, include yourself. And now I'm going to do the math real quick.
Yeah, me too.
And I'll let it go here until last time I shut it down around 85 is kind of when the 85% when the popcorn stopped popping, so to speak.
Okay. Oh, I'm so interested in this poll.
All right, so about 10 seconds and then I'll share the results here. There's a pretty good mix, but definitely small offices, as we'll see in a moment here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That seems about right.
So that makes it definitely difficult when we're talking about flexibility, depending on what the responsibilities of your offices are. If you are forward facing and working with students, having 3 people in the office, that doesn't really lead very much to being how flexible you can be with having people be remote.
Right. I like these polls on demand. Thank you so much.
No problem. Yeah, I figure as much as I can do to make it more valuable for everybody.
Yeah, so that flexibility piece, and again, like I mentioned, I'm at a new institution, so I'm learning how flexible can I be. There might be something that I may want to do, but can I do it? So I'm like learning that as I go, and I'm sure I'll have I have a lot to learn. But yeah, you may want to be flexible, but yeah, but can you be? Yeah.
One of the other questions in the chat was people are curious on who everyone reports to. And I think that can play a role in how that particular vice president may want the structure of the office to be. I know, for instance, for us, I report directly to the provost. And I don't know where anybody else. It looks like we're kind of all over the place. We see deans, I see academic affairs, provost, enrollment. Somebody president. So I think we're kind of all over the place. So again, that's going to change potentially the conversation in terms of flexibility. I mean, if somebody is, student affairs, that's going to be the forefront of them at that, whether they are allowed to have flexibility and and have any kind of remote possibilities, because it might be the focus is that you have to be available for students in the office versus if you report to another kind of vice president who might have a different priority.
Right. And I report to the VP of Academic Affairs and Dean of the College. So, which is equivalent, I think, to like provost at like other institutions as far as the hierarchy. But yeah. So yeah, it kind of depends exactly of who you're reporting to. I do have just, I don't know if this is a good time to, just the last slide is just a quote, because I love quotes and I can't quite help myself. And thank you, Catherine, for letting me put this on. So hopefully this is helpful. I love Maya Angelou. And so if you must look back, do so forgivingly. If you must look forward, do so prayerfully. However, the wisest thing you can do is be present in the present gratefully. So as we kind of think, we're thinking about the past. And I know this whole discussion was kind of a little bit of mix, looking at the past, looking at the present, looking at the future. But always, try to stay in this present moment. And that's also, what keep myself humble. That's just my little quote.
So before we end, just before we end, is there anything that we haven't addressed that somebody really wants to ask the question, whether it's in the chat, in the question, or whether you want to raise your hand and ask it verbally. So please let us know if there's anything else that is on your mind.
I saw a hand raised, but then it went away.
And I just put the chat log in the chat there, so you can download a Word doc. I didn't get a chance to edit it too closely, so there might be some redundant messages from when we reposted things from the panelist only chat to the everybody chat. But hopefully that is helpful for everybody as a resource.
Yeah, thank you so much to everyone for participating. Thank you so much to Erin and Catherine for your sharing and for your advice and your wisdom. We're grateful for this community. If you want to stay up with all things ACRO, there's a few ways to do it. Not sure if you're aware that the Small College Registrar list has recently migrated to an ACRO Google group. So to subscribe to that or any of our listservs, visit the resources section at acro.org, and you can navigate to the listservs and take it from there. We hope to see you online at some of our upcoming free webinars. August 11th, we have the Forum on Transfer and Articulation Community of Practice, which is an informal gathering of professionals engaged in the work of transfer. August 19th, you can join EDGE monthly user group to talk about best practices in international credential evaluation and new research in the EDGE database. August 25th, we will hear about a new institution, the U.S. Naval Community College, and how their work is changing naval education. August 30th, you can join members of the Women's Caucus as they discuss We Should All Be Feminists by Chimananda Ngozi Adichie at the ACRO Book Club. Please forgive me if I mispronounced the author's name. I also wanted to remind people that the call for proposals is open for ACRO's annual meeting, currently planned to be held in Portland, Oregon, April 3rd through 6th in 2022. The deadline for that is August 31st, so please submit workshop, roundtable, sessions, stop and shares. We are looking for it all for consideration. In case you missed it, you can view content from the recently held ACRO Transfer Summit that was just held a few weeks ago. We had nearly 30 sessions with the latest research-informed practices to support your transfer program. Not just what to do, but how to do it. And you can register today and you get 45 days of virtual on-demand access. Save the date also for our virtual tech summit coming up September 29th through 30th, where we will talk about the technology of transfer now and for the future. At ACRO, we understand that meaningful data exchange is not only the right thing to do to streamline credit evaluation for our learners, it's also a matter of business continuity in our current environment. ACRO wants to help you and your institution get there. Join us to stay up to date in this fast-paced environment. Finally, we're looking forward to our Strategic Enrollment Management Conference, November 14th through 17th in Miami. Whew, that's a lot going on here at ACRO. Thank you again for sharing your afternoon with us, and we will see you again soon.
Thanks, everybody.